Hey there folks, this is Pop Culture, I'm Alex Pop, and Part 5 of Ahsoka, titled Shadow Warrior, has dropped on Disney+. Beware, this review contains spoilers, and believe me, you don't want anything spoiled. Even though it probably already has been, given the thumbnails that will inevitably pop up on your YouTube feed. So to start, what can I say about this episode that I didn't like? The title, Shadow Warrior, I get the meaning behind it, but it's just boringly generic. And I'm finished. Wow, what a great time this was. I regret not hearing within the first 10 minutes that the report got out that this episode would premiere as a fan event in theaters so I could get my hands on a ticket. I can imagine it must have been the most fun audience to be a part of since Spider-Man No Way Home. This is the second episode directed by showrunner Dave Filoni, and it's easy to see that this was the section of the story that he was most excited about telling. First thing I liked about it was the way that Hera Syndulla and her squadron eventually find Ahsoka. As her son Jason looks out toward the sea, he has an inkling of what's going on in the world between worlds, due to the Force sensitivity that he inherited from his father, Kanan Jarrus, who finally got a name drop in this episode. So as we witnessed at the end of Part 4, Ahsoka has unexpectedly met with Anakin upon finding herself in the world between worlds. The two of them are there to complete her training. With her body floating around in the sea, Ahsoka is on the brink of death, and this final stretch of training determines whether she's fit to continue on living. And while I have no red flags to give for this episode, this is where I would raise a yellow flag for anyone who isn't fully equipped with knowledge of Star Wars lore. This episode doesn't delve into what exactly the world between worlds is and how it works, so despite how Dave Filoni has pitched this series as one you can watch without having seen Rebels, this is one of the occasions when it really does rely on your viewership of that show. As someone who is familiar, there were some new pieces of info about this realm that I was able to assess from the form that Anakin takes. When he appeared at the end of the last episode, I started to think that this was actually him from before Revenge of the Sith, and he had stepped through a portal out of that time. However, it becomes clear that this is in fact Afterlife Anakin, going by a few things. One being the moment when Anakin's eyes turn Sith yellow, appearing to Ahsoka as Darth Vader, minus the suit and singes. And early in the episode when he says to her, "One is never too old to learn," I also interpret as speaking to the fact that this is Anakin post-redemption. Not to mention when Ahsoka says, "I won't fight you," and he replies, "I've heard that one before," referring of course to his final duel with Luke. So apparently, in the world between worlds, Force ghosts can take on their material selves without the blue glow. Another thing worth noting is that Anakin has his mechanical right arm. No doubt he appeared to Ahsoka this way because it's exactly the way that she remembers him. What I think this implies is that Force ghosts can take any of their past forms, young or old, on command, meaning perhaps that it's not official that Hayden Christensen was the form Anakin took at the end of Return of the Jedi. I really prefer Sebastian Shaw. In my review for the last episode, I held off on commenting on the de-aging for Hayden Christensen, because even though it did look slightly unfinished to me, it was only one shot, so I thought I'd give it until the next episode. And seeing it more in motion, it looked really darn good. I'd say a notch above Luke in The Mandalorian, and maybe a notch below Luke in the Book of Boba Fett. I don't know if this was more work done by Shamuk, the YouTuber the Lucasfilm hired to do the spot-on deepfaking for Luke, but if they could recreate young adult Anakin this well, it really makes me wonder why they didn't do the same for 40-year-old Hayden in the flashback scene in the Kenobi series. Whatever the case, the splendid de-aging enhances what is certainly Hayden Christensen's best performance as the character. So as Anakin and Ahsoka begin sparring, Anakin slices the bridge, dropping Ahsoka into shadows of defining events for her during the Clone Wars. And not only that, but she's a youngling again, here portrayed by Ariana Greenblatt, who seems to be the go-to actress to play alien children, and I think she did a pretty good job. One small thing I would have liked, though, is to have had her dubbed with Ashley Eckstein, similar to how Sam Witwer's voice was overlaid with Ray Park in Solo. I may not have thought of this at all if it wasn't for the fact that there is precedent for Ashley Eckstein's voice in live-action Star Wars, We hear her among the Jedi voices who speak to Rey in The Rise of Skywalker. I understand the argument that's been made for casting Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka over Ashley Eckstein. It makes for an appropriate portrayal of the character as more seasoned. I just think it would have been a nice courtesy to have incorporated her in some way. But beggars can't be choosers. Regardless, it was a real treat to see a live-action adaptation of some of the events of the Clone Wars, albeit a hazy adaptation due to some effect of the World Between Worlds, and to see these two characters in that way. But it's not just about the image, it's familiarity that has purpose. These scenes easily could have been flooded with appearances from familiar faces in an effort to win back a bunch of the 18 million Disney Plus subscriptions they lost in the past year, but the only such cameo to speak of is Captain Rex. When it got to the Siege of Mandalore, I got even more excited thinking, oh my gosh, are we going to see Maul? And when he never showed up, I didn't feel robbed in any way because he didn't need to be there. All the nostalgic stuff was limited to just what was important for Ahsoka's character arc in facing the memories that still haunt her. The first of these sequences, I at first wasn't sure was an event we saw in Clone Wars, so I looked it up, and indeed it was. It was the Battle of Ryloth from Season 1. I admittedly haven't watched every single episode of Clone Wars hundreds of times, so it made me want to rewatch that 3-episode arc. It was Ahsoka's first time as commander of a clone squadron, and on her first run she ignored orders to return to the ship and led them into an ambush and several of them to their deaths, as she obliquely references in Shadow Warrior. It's powerful to think that it was the losses of that battle that have stayed with her all this time, as opposed to the eventual outcome, because it was a battle they won. There was this big celebration when it was all over. And while as a youngling she may have been able to brush it off for a time because of the victory, as time went on she could only wish that she had had more wisdom in her youth that they wouldn't have sustained these losses. So now Anakin helps her understand that yes, a leader shouldn't disregard the loss of life that comes from his or her mistakes, but also be able to deal with the inevitable sacrifice that comes with victory. Another thing that pertains to Ahsoka's arc is what Anakin became, as the first half of the series has been hinting at. At first I figured it was that she had regrets of leaving the Jedi Order and therefore leaving Anakin, wondering if he ever would have turned and brought about the Empire had she stayed with him. And while that may be part of it, it evidently has more to do with her having fears of what she's gained from Anakin, which I think is safe to say is the reason for her quitting on Sabine's training and becoming a drifter. When Anakin says to her, "Within you will be everything I am," those words are not reassuring to her because that's just what she's scared of, knowing that he became Darth Vader. When he sees that this is what's going on with her, that's when he takes Vader's shape for Ahsoka to face head-on. So another duel breaks out between them, and as Ahsoka bests him by grabbing his red lightsaber and holding it to his neck, that's when she realizes that her very fear of becoming Darth Vader may be what's potentially sending her down that road.
Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
As Anakin overcame Darth Vader, she too needs to overcome Vader in order to carry on Anakin's legacy. So she returns to her life having made the decision to keep on fighting, and with her new beginning, she gets the Gandalf upgrade as Ahsoka the White. All of these scenes were so enthralling from beginning to end, and brought me so much joy and satisfaction as a longtime fan of Star Wars and the character of Ahsoka. All I can say is, bravo Dave Filoni. Bravo. Hats off as well to score composer Kevin Kiner, who also did the music for the Clone Wars. This episode has the greatest music in all of the Star Wars shows thus far. From the beautiful piece we hear when the World Between Worlds fades away from Ahsoka, to the rendition of the Force theme when Jason senses Ahsoka's trials. And it was great to hear a few of those haunting notes from the very end of the Clone Wars' final season. I have nearly no idea where the show is headed next, but I do want to offer one potential bit of speculation, even though I may be completely blind to how insane it would be. So Ahsoka remembers what Huyang said before about how the directions of the map align with the migration route of the Star Whales, so they plan to hitch a ride with them to follow Baylan and Sabine. As Ahsoka is communicating with one to take them to the unknown galaxy, Jason says to his mother, "It's like the stories you told me of how the whales took Ezra far, far away." Now, far, far away could have no intention behind it beyond just being a direct reference to the title card that every Star Wars movie opens with. But that title card tells us that the galaxy Star Wars takes place in is far, far away from us. So, for Jason to phrase it as such, I just get an inkling that Star Wars is about to venture into our solar system. Would they actually go for it?
Hey, I think this guy's a couple cans short of a six-pack.
If that really is where the show is headed, which I think is still a big if, I'm not sure what to think as of yet, but I feel like it would be kind of cool to see the story of Anakin, and Luke for that matter, cross into our galaxy, making it sort of parabolic of how the legacy of Star Wars has impacted our world in real life. Or maybe I am just crazy. Do let me know what you think of that possibility in the comments. In the end, I think it goes without saying, Part 5 edges out Part 4 as the best episode so far. After Part 3, my score for the show was a 6 out of 10. These last two fantastic episodes have pulled it up to an 8 out of 10. I honestly found so much satisfaction in Part 5 that I feel like the season could have ended here, with Ahsoka blasting off into the stars to find her friends, and I would have had no problem waiting a year to see what comes next. But we sure got a bargain. Still 3 episodes to go. That's a wrap. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review, and be sure to let me know what you thought of Part 5 of Ahsoka in the comments below. Like and share, subscribe for more. This is Pop Culture. I'm Alex Pop.